Ein gras for agus Ulavianichu. Sin tanker son Knurran Aviation got Yamsi at the Matin Show Sur. Pershing the fan at Talo Tro, agus Slino agus Fio Fosketching. Agus Shin on the years clearest. She and Lee, she needing, she ve. She origin your ruin as she had a fan crying. On the show you could the lake said, real commission you could Yarabse agus haar doges on het Haar huizen kudig veeg ik dat jamsi. Agus hou gaan trodig agus hou gaan stuurdig. Schandaags vertreed je vest. Beslogen ook een spees. Had shot jaartje en jaar te lijf. Sambalgen naar die ene is een honie. Oosje commission jullie dadu en jegensjen. Jegene bezit jori in hjorne aan een spirit dus aan de vieri. Snjegene jorste aan een spirit aan de vieri joatas joat. Joat behes biaken is paltje. Jorschen met de piano aan de show met de konderische haartjes konderische areolen. Nou half ik het een keer areolen is gewoon la show. Dat je vastgezet hoogste show haken. Ze gewoon als je koning met de konderische is misschien jori met kleefjes areolen. Misschien kan daar keuzen en al. Dat de mogelijke zonkel door de genevischen Korea gaan en gras. Dan gaan van zijn trook. Het zijn troken door. Kuje sin ich ruhig, die betekent es wie nach Frestel. Nach mal ut san kele seite en hasha von gejoch schön und alfas und omaka. Kan je lager kan je skale chon dat je manjerutse. O jan troken door, ze geen spirit door niet te goede haan. Gleesjen sin se manes kan je skacht is. Amen.
Ja, dag Bertien. Note the meeting is now being recorded. You will all be well versed on the conduct of the meeting, but I will remind you of the following. If you are a member of the committee attending remotely, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. Officers, please leave both off unless you are called to speak to a report or answer a question. A reminder to those members in the chamber of the queuing system. If you wish to ask a question, please leave your mic on in case you wish to come back on a response. Committee members will be given priority. In regard to declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end the call remotely. Finally, a reminder that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. Items 6 and 13 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting. And prior to moving into private, participants other than the relevant officer and members will be asked to leave the meeting. Now we'll move on to the agenda proper. First item, minute of meeting of 1st December 2021, and that's for approval. Councillor McNeill.
Chair, I was just wanted to declare an interest in item 6. I've got a family connection, so I'll be leaving for.
Okay. Are we happy to approve the minute? 2 minute of meeting of Hightons of 12th November 2021, which is for noting. Happy to note. Yes, thank you. Declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they have in any item on the agenda. It would be helpful if members expressed why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Members in the chambers, please do so now by pressing your microphone on or remotely through Teams by using the raise hand function. And please ensure the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. Other than Councillor McNeill, do we have any declarations of interest? I'm seeing a hand up, but I don't know whose hand it is. Oh, Grant.
Thanks, Chair. Grant Fulton, Harrison South Lochs. It's just a question on the agenda. I notice there's no specific mention of the Tarbuck Uig Calmac mezzanine deck and summer timetable issue in the agenda. I know the Chair's been working very hard on this over the last few months on an issue which is going to impact significantly the local ferry users. Is it going to be touched on in this meeting or an update? Thanks, Chair.
Well, we thought some other members have asked about, particularly about the ICIE. So I said maybe we can have a discussion when we come to the ATMS where ICIE is discussed at that point, if you're happy with that, Grant.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can't leave the ferries out of it. I'm seeing a hand up on the screen. I don't know whose it is though.
Perhaps that might be me, Chairman. It's Callum Macmillan. I'm not a member of your committee, but I declare an interest in item 13 as a director of the Euston Barra Housing Group, or at least a member of the Euston Barra Housing Group, with an aspiration to acquiring the Earcher Schoolhouse, or Earcher Headmaster Schoolhouse, and the Earcher Janitor Schoolhouse. So I'll be leaving the meeting at that point, although as a non-member of the committee, I'd probably be leaving anyway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Macmillan. I assume that's the same declaration, Councillor McNeill?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other lights on, so we can move on to performance management 2021-22, Q3, property and infrastructure. This report provides an overview of the property and infrastructure and IT business plan progress and related performance for Q3 21-22. And Callum Mackenzie will speak to the report and answer any questions. Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just highlight one or two points of the report, and then I'm happy to take questions on the other content if anybody has them. So members will probably be aware that the Burnell Bridge opened on the 15th of December 2021, and we've continued to proceed with the delivery of the other bridge repairs which have been funded by Scottish Government. In general, finance will be reported separately. However, I would like to highlight some areas of pressure just now, as roads and property maintenance budgets remain tightly managed and under pressure. Income targets as well are difficult to achieve due to a reduction in capital. And just dwelling on capital for a minute, with a reduced allocation of capital in the coming years, just highlighting that roads capital, property capital and marine infrastructure is likely to deteriorate in terms of condition over this period. So just a highlight there that with reductions in capital, it is harder to manage and maintain our infrastructure. In terms of budget savings, the savings target for accommodation has been difficult to achieve over the past year due to COVID, but there are still some issues with partners wondering what to do with the hybrid model of working. So that's delaying a bit of a decision from our partners on sharing accommodation. The winter so far has been relatively mild. Compared to the same time last year, we'd been out 33 times, we've been out 25 times this year. If things continue to be mild, then we could see an underspend of around about 300,000 on the budget. However, that's assuming no activity between now and the end of the season. The figures we're quoting just now include for activity we had in April last year. So there is a tendency for us to get dips in temperature later on in the season as well. So when I'm quoting underspends, it's fully dependent on the weather. I'm just happy to take any further questions on the report here if any members have them.
Okay, thank you, Callum. Any questions for Callum? This item. Yes, convener.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Callum for that update. But I do think there needs to be a serious attempt at repairing roads, particularly single track roads. And if I'm honest, in our own ward, I mean, we have a significant amount of heavy traffic on single track roads, and there are massive cracks in the road surface, and through time that's going to it's just going to slip away. So I appreciate that we've got difficult times in terms of our roads maintenance, and that's been the case for the last 2 or 3 years, to be honest, in some cases. But it is something that we should be approaching government for directly, because we cannot continue to do just small patches that will, within a matter of months, they'll just disappear again. We need to get some substantial road finance from the government, and I think we should be pushing that as hard as we can.
Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. I would like that the South Ford Causeway Stakeholder Group starts meeting again. It's been over 6 years since it met, and there's obviously a lot of things have happened around the South Ford in that time, and with the with consultants going to be put in place for an EIA, I think it's important that we start picking up that work again. If Calla would be happy enough to get involved in that, or somebody from his team.
Right, Callum, do you want to respond to both these, the question from the convener and which we probably all agree with anyway, and Councillor McNeill?
I can't disagree with what the convener said at all. So I'm in full support of looking at every avenue where we can get additional monies towards roads infrastructure. In relation to Councillor McNeill's request, the EIA in itself will require consultation, and through that we will look for appropriate mechanisms to have community consultation. So I'm not sure if the stakeholder group as it stood last time would still be that particular mechanism, but I'm happy to have further discussions with Councillor McNeill as to the community aspirations on that matter, but also technically with my own team as to what kind of consultation the consultants will be undertaking in terms of the EIA. So if Councillor McNeill is happy with that, I'll have some further discussion with him.
That would be fine. Councillor McNeill's raised this a number of times, his concern about the stakeholders. That did exist a long time ago now, and I think some of them have moved on since then. Yes, Councillor McNeill?
Yes, I would welcome that. It definitely needs to look at again and refreshing and updating, like the chair says. There's people that moved on, some of them permanently. Needs to be picked up again. So I'll be in touch, Callum. Thank you very much.
Right, if you can follow that up then with Callum. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not a member of your committee. Mention was made there of the transport capital and the roads capital particularly, and I was hoping that a commitment could be given that the levelling up fund and future capital would be initially expended and used on the spinal route, because we have at the moment a both directions live lane, what you might call single track road, and the level of traffic simply makes the use or the travelling along that road almost a hindrance rather than an opportunity to go somewhere, because of the stop-start nature of it, where we look at passing places as a piece of two-way road. So that can we get an assurance that the projects will, from the levelling up fund and any future capital, will first of all go to continuing and completing the spinal route on a both lanes basis from Barra, from Battersea to Bernary. I'd like your assurance on that, Mr. Mackenzie. Thank you.
Callum, do you want to come back on that? I know you've actually looked at sections on the spinal road and the levelling up, and it does include Harris as well, Mr. Fulton. I saw the annoyance cross your face at that point. Yes, Callum, you want to come back?
We've discussed levelling up funding on the various projects that we would include previously at this committee, and we have included some sections of spinal route. We've also included sections of critical links causeways, bridges. So in context, they wouldn't, supposing we got all the money that was available through transportation in the levelling up fund, so there's £50 million bid available to each roads authority, that wouldn't really come anywhere near completing the spinal road sections through the US or the Western Isles. So the principle we've used is what's going to be of most benefit to people travelling along that spinal route. And it is looking at specific sections. And as the chairman said, we're looking at sections in Harris and looking at sections in Uist, which basically have the most traffic on them just now in terms of north to south travel and use of spinal route. I think it's sensible as well for us to include the other issues of causeways and resilience of these links through the islands, and looking at the elements of active travel as well and tourism. So we've tried to be pretty balanced in our application for the Levelling Up Fund and looking at all these excuse me, aspects of road transport. So what I can't give Councillor McMillan is a commitment that the full application will go to the spinal route or single track sections in Uist and Barra.
Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Calla, for your report. I too agree with the convener about road maintenance. He's very popular today, convener. But I hope that Mr Mackenzie will give priority to maintaining the roads of point. Anyway, on a more serious note, can I get some clarification about item 11.5, Bernard Bridge? We all welcome the fact that we have a new bridge, a substantial bridge, and in place now. 3.1 million was allocated by the Scottish Government. Is this special funding, or is that coming out of our capital allocation? Just for clarification.
Callum?
Okay, the total cost for Bernard Bridge was 3.1. The total allocation we got from Scottish Government was 6.6 million. We did put an application into Scottish Government for 10.3 million, I think it was. 10.5 million, which was for our top 10 bridge structures to be able to take these up to a good standard for the future. We were successful in getting funding for 6 of these structures. 6.67 million, which was allocated by Scottish Government to the Western Isles, was the highest allocation in Scotland. So we actually welcome the Scottish Government's commitment to our local bridge structures here. It will help enormously with this capital programme and the next capital programme, because we did have a commitment to do work on Scapie Bridge, which we were to find out of our own budgets for the next investment period. So it is of tremendous benefit for us to have this allocation of money, and it's going to allow us to take these 6 bridges up to a good standard for the future for us.
Did that answer your question?
Not really. Thank you very much, Clara. Calla, I agree with you there. Does the 6.6 million come out of our total capital allocation? Is our capital allocation reduced overall? That's just a question I'm asking for clarification. You might not be able to answer it. I'm not sure, Calla.
The 6.6 should not come out of our capital allocation. I think Norman MacDonald is the best person to answer this question, but I believe our total capital allocation for the next year has been reduced. To what extent, Norman will wish to advise.
Okay, can you put your light up, Alistair? I'll let the Chief Executive in. He's flashing green behind you.
much preferable. Just to assist Mr Mackenzie, I know the draft report for Policy and Resources Committee on capital monitoring will answer these questions. I can't remember the detail. There is an adjustment to our capital to reflect our success, as it were, in the bridges and structures funding, but I can't give the detailed figures just now. But it will be on the Policy and Resources Committee agenda on the capital monitoring report.
You happy with that, Councillor McLeod? Happy-ish. Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. Could Mr Mackenzie be more specific in what areas of road in US would be looked at? I know that over 20 years ago, prior to the Bernary Causeway being built, that a section of road was pegged out and the money diverted for that project was put into the Bernary Bridge at the time, and these plans are still gathering dust in an office somewhere. So I would like to think that would be top of the pile since it's shovel ready.
Not necessarily. I believe you're meeting consultants shortly, Colin, and you haven't made any final decisions. It'll be next June before the Levelling Up Fund applications are made. Is that correct?
We believe so. It's not been confirmed yet when the actual applications, when they open for applications, but the indications are it will be June, to coincide with the same date last year when the applications were in. The main sections we're looking at in US just now are from the section from Bernary to the Macian Junction on the Lochmaddy Road. So taking that all the way through double track. We're also considering the Loch B section as well, but trying to balance these sections based on what the cut and fill ratios would be. So what I mean by that is that we're trying to pick sections where there's not too much disposal of unsuitable materials such as peat, and that can be balanced with excavation of rock into these areas. So just now, just to answer Councillor McNeill's question, is we're looking at the section from Bernary Causeway to McCain's Quarry on the Lochmaddy Road and a section at Loch B as well.
Thank you.
There you go, Councillor McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. The question of spending on roads is a very vexed question, and I recall in the very early days of my time in this council where an allocation was given by the Scottish Government annually, which we were able to spend on the spinal route, so that progressively we were overtaking the issue of making two-way traffic a possibility throughout the islands, and that was a high priority for this council. But given the cuts to our capital over the years since then, that process has almost ceased, and now we're looking to the UK government to resolve the problem for us. My question to Mr. Mackenzie is, and incidentally, I'm comfortable with your policy in terms of the roads. My question is there any way in which we can restore the capital expenditure to the islands for expenditure on the roads from the Scottish Government? Or is it the case that nowadays all we get is, and I'm not trying to be disparaging in this, but all we get is money that we specifically apply for specific projects?
Colin, can you answer Councillor McCormick, please?
The main funding we had in the past towards the spinal route was based on EU funding for remote communities. There was significant EU money came into the Western Isles. Latterly, the priorities for EU funding changed, and we weren't able to get so much money into double track or single track roads. The only mechanism we see just now really is through the Levelling Up Fund, and that's through UK government. There is a specific allocation that each roads authority gets from Scottish Government in terms of roads, but that's part of the capital allocation that we get. But again, locally, the council may decide to put that capital into other projects. So the capital requirements across the Cornwall estate, not just on roads, but properties, marine infrastructure, care homes, etc. There are significant challenges coming up, and it's how we balance that spend, where we decide to spend that money. So the corporate management team led by the chief executive will, in the near future, be considering investment requirements across all services. And that will include roads, it'll include bridges, it'll include schools, it'll include care homes, offices, our whole estate. So these will be some difficult questions, difficult decisions to be made in the future based on what capital we are allocated. I am seeing a lot more pots of money opening from various streams, be it Scottish Government or UK Government, and we will be trying our best to apply for these as appropriate. So one example is the report coming up later on in the agenda on road safety. Scottish Government are allocating significant additional monies towards road safety improvements. So that's a pot of money that we'll be bidding into. There may be other opportunities that arise as well through the replacement of EU funding mechanisms. So I'm sorry, Councillor McCormack, that's not a very clear and concise answer to your question, but I think to summarise, we will try every avenue we can to maximise the amount of capital we have coming into the Comhairle, and we will be prepared as officers with what the capital needs will be across the services, and furnish you with information to make decisions on where that is prioritised. Thank you, Chair.
Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I think the plea to any and all governments and funders from officers would be that we move to multi-year settlements, which allows proper strategic capital and indeed revenue planning. The current approach of one-year budgets, and there are political arguments about why that is, into which I wouldn't go, but it does not encourage and it does not promote strategic financial planning, because a bid culture is inevitably around specific projects and around the conditions of the bid, and one single year budgets from any source do not help the kind of strategic planning we need for our transport needs in the Western Isles. So if those points could be borne in mind as well.
Councillor McCormick.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the officers for their response. What troubles me greatly is that it is not necessarily our priorities that we are pursuing as a council. We are pursuing the priorities which are driven by the money that we receive from the Scottish Government. That is regrettable in my view, because it is not necessarily addressing the most important issues that we have. I really do think that we need to persuade government, if we possibly can, that we should be, they should be listening to us as to the issues that we are going to have in the future, and allow us to address. I mean, the spinal route, for example, is something that's been a high priority for this council for as long as I've been on, certainly, and yet it seems to have just ground to a halt. The government is just ignoring it completely, and that's not acceptable. So I think in going forward in our discussions with government, we'll come to a conclusion as to just exactly what sort of sums of capital money we require, and then ask them if they would be kind enough to give us the money and allow us to spend it to our best advantage. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's a problem we have across a number of fields, Angus, in terms of priorities, you know. Yeah. In a way, I think with a yes, convener, I'm not seeing. Oh, Keith, sorry, Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I concur with what Councillor McCormack has stated, that just fact that if there's any shortfalls in relating to roads, etc., I would not like to see this council given a carte blanche on the council tax, where we'll be allowed to go up to 4.8%. And I think, to me, that's passing the buck back to the local people and for the local authority to make that decision. And it's just plain, especially in these hard times for our community. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Keith. Yes, convener.
Thank you, Chair. If we look at our counterparts in Orkney and Shetland, they have used their funding that has come predominantly from the oil, the oil industry, and we had aspirations within the council here that renewable energy would be the way that we would be able to source capital funding and make improvements to not just the roads network, but much beyond that. Now, that's something that is still an aspiration for us. It's very challenging going forward, but I still think that we need to push government both in Holyrood and in Westminster to honour some of the indications that we've had from them over the last 5 to 10 years or so. So I really do think we need to do a big push on that. Otherwise, we're still going to be struggling around, and the roads are going to be falling apart, and there may not be very many people around who's going to be able to fix it in a hurry.
Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to raise the difficult case of the generator in Sacred Heart House. That last weekend with long power cuts was very problematic for the staff, to the extent that they were taking thermos flasks in the building. I also believe that the Three Anatches care homes generated is not much better, though that one's working, but by tricks only. So I would like to see that these generators for the people in our care homes are looked upon as some kind of priority, Cal, if we could. I know you've had discussions with Councillor Steele over this, but we really need to be looking at this with seriously now.
We had this discussion obviously on Monday, Colin, and I'm satisfied that you're working hard on this particular issue. Do you want to pass comment in terms of what you're doing at the moment?
I'm happy to do so, Chair. We have looked at this in the past, and been working with the care service and the care home directly on the frequency of power outages and the impact on the care staff and the residents. So we are reviewing that again in light of last weekend. We've been in touch with the care home staff, and we're looking at the impacts that they suffered. We've got options, of costed options for replacement generator in Tacken, and at the moment we're looking at putting together a funding bid to SSE's Community Resilience Fund. So I'll keep in touch with the care home management and staff on the issue, and update as we make progress, if any, with funding applications.
Can you make sure you keep in touch with Councillor McNeill in terms of the funding application you've done, please, because it is something that's concerned Councillor McNeill and Councillor Steele over a while in relation to the number of power cuts, particularly in Dalborough.
I will do, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, what will happen in the case that you're unsuccessful in your application to the SSE fund?
You want to respond to that?
Well, there's a balance here of the frequency of power outages against the impact on the residents and the staff, and we need to better understand what that is in, what may be a growing community need to have additional resilience there. So we're looking at these factors, Councillor McNeill, and I don't want to prejudice any decision that may come from funding from alternative sources or ourselves on this matter. But I think that the commitment I can give just now is that we will review the situation and come back with our findings to yourself and Councillor Paul Steele as well. And indeed the leader as well has been involved in discussions we've had on this. So I will keep all of you informed with progress.
Okay, thank you, Callum.
Thank you.
Right, any more questions for Callum? He's been given a very hard time this morning. No? Okay, Convener, are you suggesting we put an additional recommendation in here in terms of the roads, or are you happy with what the Chief Executive, CMT and everybody else is doing in relation to? Or do you want me to write personally to somebody?
I think that would be quite useful, and I think certainly the leader will be part of that process as well. But the roads network right across the islands are in a really poor state in terms of the surface, and the surface breaking up as it is impacting on the substructure as well, and that's where the biggest issue is, because many of our roads are literally floating on peat, and we need to do something significant on that.
So we'll get together, Callum, and maybe with the leader and put something together on this if members are happy. Okay. Right, thank you. So with that addition, do members agree recommendation 3.1? But a note of all that machine. Okay, item 5, performance management, consumer environmental services. This report provides an overview of the community's director's business plan progress and related performance for Q3 21-22. The area of relevance to this committee is municipal services at section 6.12 to 6.19 of the report. And David McLeod will speak to the report and answer any questions. David.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of service provision, we have managed to maintain all of our services through the Omicron part of the pandemic. We still remain fairly cautious with our staff resources to make sure that we maintain a bit of resilience and still operate to the WISH forum guidance. Refuse collection tonnages, we've still noted that there has the increase that we brought to the committee's attention last series. That has maintained an increased level over the period October, November. We've got only partial data for December, but it's showing an increase of up to 14.6%, which is quite significant, and that's put pressure on both the collection service and it will result in increased landfill tax costs. Recycling, surprisingly, it has maintained, it has gone up in the same sort of level, so it's not as if it's just a general increase in waste overall rather than people not bothering with recycling. In terms of recycling improvements, the grant from Scottish Government's Recycling Improvement Fund initial award was 784,000. We went back to Scottish Government regarding the price increases from suppliers since the prices were obtained in April, May last year, and have now increased that award to 840k. Which is good. We're still waiting for the formal award letter to be issued so that we can start placing orders for bins and the bin lorry and recycling banks. But once we've done that, we'll be able to work out a formal programme of implementation. We're not really expecting the bins to be delivered till the end of the financial year, and the additional refuse collection vehicle is probably going to be a bit longer than that. But we will, I think, because of the committee programme going forward, I will try and arrange a member officer working group just to discuss the programme once we've got that finalised. The cell at Benidorm, that work is ongoing. They had some issues with the storm last weekend, and that might have put back the programme a couple of weeks, but certainly up until then, they were on track for March 2022 completion, which would mean that we would have access to the cell probably from the end of April. And really that's it. In terms of the island, inter-island air service from Benbeck to Stornoway, we have had a bid for that. I haven't seen the financial figures yet. It's just come in that last weekend. We've had the sort of standard quality assessment done first, but we haven't reviewed the financial options yet. But we will bring that back once we've got that information available. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for David? Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. On the air service, David, we only had one bid back.
That's as far as I'm aware. That's the position, but I haven't seen the finances yet, so I don't know. We did give quite a number of options to try and make sure that we did get a price, or at least try to give us an option of getting a price that we could afford, but I haven't seen the figures yet.
We'll be keeping in touch with this one, Councillor MacLeod. Anybody else? Any questions for David? No? Okay, thank you. Insofar as this committee's interests are concerned, the members agree recommendation 3.1. Agreed, thank you. Following item is in private, so we will move on to item 7, which is Port Marine Safety Code and Designated Persons Audits Monitoring Report. This report provides an update and progressing recommendations within the 3-year external Port Marine Safety Code and the annual Designated Persons Audits. The outcomes of the PMSC external audits were reported to the committee in December, and this report provides an update on 2 specific issues, one of which is subject to the following item on the agenda, and it also presents the action plan to address the audit recommendations going forward. As Harbour Board, you will continue to monitor progress of both the internal and external audits through a regular joint report to this committee. Kenneth Morrison will speak to the report and answer any questions. Have you got anything to add, Kenneth?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one update since the report was written in terms of, it was agreed that there'd be extra 10 days as part of the tender bid for consultants. So the 10 days be used for draft of the general directions by end of December and standard operating procedures by the end of January. So as you see, the concurrent report is the general directions draft. And I have received kind of a draft of the standard operating procedures, which I'll be reviewing over the next while, and they'll be operational once they're agreed. So in terms of the designated person report, the appendix gives an update. I'm happy to take any questions on any part of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kenya. Does anybody have any questions on this particular agenda item? No. Okay, do members agree the recommendation of 3.1? Agreed, thank you. Item 8, general directions for navigation. This report seeks approval for the introduction of general directions for navigation at Comhairle Harbour, which was raised as one of the priorities for action from the external audit. Purpose of these directions is to promote or secure conditions conducive to the ease, convenience or safety of navigation and the safety of persons and property in a harbour area. It is proposed that these be approved for consultation in the first instance. Kenneth Morrison will speak to the report and answer any questions. Anything to add, Kenneth?
No, just to note that part of the report where it says that it'll, if you approve this draft, it'll go out to consultation with stakeholders and the finalised directions will be submitted to the June series for approval. I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Kenya. Any questions for Kenneth? No? Okay, thank you. Do members agree recommendation 3.1? Agreed, thank you. Move on to air services now. Scottish Government Consultation, Aviation Strategy. This report is to inform the Comhairle of the Scottish Government's Aviation Strategy Consultation and seek homologation of the Comhairle's response submitted by the deadline of 21st January 2021, which went out with the committee cycle. Hytrans also responded, and the Comhairle's response on their submission were relevant. Angus Murray will speak to the report and answer any questions. Angus?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is a national consultation, and there was a tight deadline in terms of taking it to committee. So paragraph 5.2 is quite a specific consultation. Paragraph 5.2 of the report outlines the areas covered by the consultation, and it also outlines areas not covered. And you'll note the reference to SDPR2 there. The Comhairle's response is appended to the report, and it was submitted on 21st of January, but I note that Hytrans have been given an extension for their submission. So on that basis, I think Scottish Government could accommodate further comments from ourselves if we have any to make. So I'd just like to thank my colleague Linda for putting that response together, and also input from David as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Angus. Any questions? No, thank you, Angus, for that, and thank you also to Linda and to David, I know, who contributed hugely to it. Do members agree recommendation 3.1? Yep. Okay, thank you. And then air traffic management strategy update. This report provides an update on recent developments concerning HIAL's ATMS and related proposals. As members will be aware, HIAL's position last month was that procurement had ceased while negotiations with the trade union were ongoing. That said, the managing director made it clear that ATMS is HIAL's preferred option. As the report mentions, there have been further meetings and updates since the report was written, and I will ask Angus Murray to speak to the report, and the Chief Executive is also available to answer any questions. We're all experts on air traffic control now, I assume. Angus?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, the report precedes the developments that occurred at the end of January there. But the Chief Executive was of a mind to put the report up anyway. The HIAL board met on 24th of January, and there was a joint press statement from HIAL and Prospect on the 27th. And essentially, the message was that Radar would continue at Inverness, the retention of air traffic tower services at Sunborough, Kirkwall, Stornoway, Inverness and Dundee, and that future service delivery at Benbecula would be subject to further negotiations, Benbecula and John of Roswick, further negotiations with HIAL through a working group, the composition of which is unknown at the moment. So there are no timescales. So there's still a degree of uncertainty about the future of Benbecula. So you'll note from the report that there's, consideration could be given, for example, for a specific ICIA relating particularly to Benbecula. So maybe that's something that the Comhairle may wish to consider. And that's it from me. I don't know if the Chief Executive has anything to add.
Okay, Angus, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So why there's an echo here. I know there are still issues with Benbecular, so I want to get this particular letter referred to you first, and then we can discuss the Benbecular issues which are ongoing. And it's just to say that I received a letter from Prospect members at Air Traffic Control in Stornoway, and it's headed up thanks on behalf of Prospect ATC members Stornoway. And it says that, dear Mr. Mackay, in the coming weeks, many parties will be claiming that they had a pivotal role in securing these valuable jobs and ensuring that they remain in the communities that they serve. However, it is our opinion that a swift and steadfast opposition to the proposals from the Western Isles Council has been instrumental in getting Comhairle to reverse their ill-thought-out plans. We would like to take this opportunity to thank both yourself and the wider council membership and officers for all the help and support over the course of the previous years. We would like to pay particular thanks to Ushton Robertson, who has gone above and beyond in the course of his duties as chair of the Transport Committee. He has shown himself to be a formidable public servant and has worked tirelessly throughout the campaign. Going forward, we hope to be able to serve the wider communities of the Western Isles for many years to come. Yours thankfully and sincerely, Prospect Air Traffic Staff Stornoway. So I think that is a fair reflection and a lot of hard work over a number of years, and particularly by yourself, but acknowledging that all members were very supportive of it. And it is good to get feedback like that and shows what can be done when we work together to get outcomes that are beneficial to the community. So I wanted to just record that before we go on to discussion.
Well, thank you for that. I hope you've gone back to them as well. You know, I mean, we did put a lot of work into it, you know, and a lot of MSPs, MPs, other councils, everybody worked quite hard on this. So yeah. It's not often we get praised for anything, is it?
I think you should enjoy the moment. So.
Yes, I think I'll leave now. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair, and I would support these observations. This has been a very successful piece of work led by this council, with members and officers working very well together on the outcomes. And I too would like to convey my thanks to you and other members for leading the campaign at political level. However, matters are not quite concluded, as you know. There is much of interest in the announcement from Comhairle, their update of 27th January, and I wouldn't add to what Angus Murray has already said, but we have yet another working group to discuss future service delivery options for Benbecular. Now, that's a very wide remit, which I suppose is to be welcomed. It should, in our view, as should the original proposal, be subject to a rigorous islands impact assessment. It's also very interesting to note that the Comhairle board recognised that further detailed work will be required before a comprehensive business case can be presented to Transport Scotland, and that too will include a review of the islands impact assessment. It is remarkable, I think, that Comhairle, though, continues to choose one option over other options, while saying that a comprehensive business case is still to be prepared and presented. That's an odd way of taking decisions, in my view. But the point is, it has been. We are assured that air traffic tower services will continue to be provided locally at the airports that are named, including Stornoway. That there will be this working group for Benbecular, and that there is lots of process and input still before Transport Scotland is presented with an option, and we have to be fully involved in that. Turning to the recommendation, you may think it's a rather complicated recommendation, and as Angus Murray has noted, this report was written before the announcement, so perhaps the urgency that is implied in the recommendation is probably not now so manifest, but the purpose of the recommendation remains entirely relevant. And I'll go through it because it's lengthy. You've been asked to authorise me. You already have in relation to previous aspects of this matter, in consultation with the two chairs and vice chairs, just to take such actions as are required to protect socio-economic well-being. Now, that includes the necessary legal advice and action. I think that has been authorised before. It was simply to reaffirm it, whether to be any move to implement the downgrade of Benbecula before April. But it is clear from the announcement from Comhairle that will not be forthcoming. I'm minded, though, simply to ask the committee to approve the recommendations in any case, because they are then there if required, particularly during the pre-election period. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I asked at a meeting in Comhairle on Friday if they had decided on the makeup of the working group or any of that, and Engel said they hadn't at this point. And I believe the two petitions are in front of Parliament today, the one on the Comhairle issue raised by Benbecula Community Council, and the other one in relation to the makeup of boards, which was raised by the Youth Task Force. I believe they're being discussed in Parliament today, so we'll see what happens with that. But in terms, I had a brief conversation with Councillor Fulton early, and I'm going to allow a discussion on the ICIA, if you're happy with that, in relation to, and I've written to you on this, and I know Councillor Finnegan has as well, in relation to the EU closure. I just, if we can have some clarity on that, the ICIA in terms of closure.
Yes, I think that's something we should debate with Transport Scotland. I mean, the standard for the requirement for an ICIA is where there is a change to a policy, strategy, or service. I think this would fall into the service category, and it would have. I mean, it would have a very material effect, obviously, on the transport arrangements, and hence the commerce and the lives of people in North Euston and Harris particularly. So on that basis, it is a substantial change to the service. It may be said it's a technical matter. Uig Pier is closing for redevelopment, and that is wholly technical. But that does not mean that the replacement service should not be subject to ICIA. So, subject to what's said at the committee today, I will certainly explore that with Transport Scotland and see what if they have taken legal advice on the matter and what that legal advice is. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Grant, and I know Councillor Finnegan raised this as well. I'll let Councillor Finnegan in first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Not a member of your committee. For me, it goes to being a much bigger thing than I know we're talking. It's very important. We're talking about Comhairle, and obviously myself and Grant will be talking about what's happening with the summer timetable and CalMac, and the fact that CalMac haven't done any kind of impact assessment and seem not interested in actually doing one. And the thing that worries me more is the fact that the Scottish Government are not actually pushing them to make them do it, which is really their responsibility. And I think this, for us as a council, I think this is a much bigger picture in terms of the Islands Act and in terms of what the government isn't doing to support the Islands Act, and to actually, I mean, they brought it in 2018. At the end of the day, they seem to me to be completely ignoring it. And this affects us in every, seems to be affecting us in every area. In not only in terms of ferries and transport, it's the interconnector. I mean, like the convener said earlier on, you know, for us that's our economic gold mine potentially going forward, and yet it's been put back to 2027. We're on a 450 megawatt cable potentially. You know, it seems to be one thing after another, and I just think that as a council, we're the policymakers here as councillors, and I think we have to start looking at some sort of strategy of how we continue to apply pressure all the time on every issue. Every time it comes up, we go back to them and we attack them again and again and again, because as far as I can see, we're largely being ignored. And if it wasn't for the work that the chair has done over this, I don't even think we'd have got an impact assessment regarding the Comhairle issue, to be honest with you. When I was working in the third sector, one of the roles I had was to represent the third sector on the development of this template, working with the council, working with HI and others, the Health Board and Scottish Government themselves. And there was an urgency at that time by Scottish Government that every local authority to put one in place. And obviously for us it was pretty urgent because of the Comhairle case. And it's been put in place. They've asked us to put it in place, and they're basically ignoring it. And for me, it's just a much bigger issue, and I think we really need to look at this. And I know it's not ideally the forum for this particular committee, but I certainly think we have to start looking at this now in much more of a strategic way, you know, and how we're actually going to deal with this going forward, because it's continual. And we can say, oh, we won't really do anything, but it's until the next time, and there's something else, and then they do it again and again and again, and we have to really look at how we can actually take this forward. And just as an aside, this isn't an attack on SNP councillors or SNP government. I don't really care what government's in power. This happens to be the government of the day, and so this is the government that's not doing what they should be doing. And I think we really need to hold them to account, really quite seriously now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Finnegan. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. It was just come back to the letter. It was good to hear these comments. We on the group would like to convey our huge appreciation and thanks to the Prospect Union actually for supporting their members through this difficult time. And it just shows how important union representation is and always has been. So I'd just like to make that comment.
You might have a slightly separate view from Benbecula at this point, Gordon. But anyway, Councillor Bolton, do you want to come back on the ICIA stuff? Or are you happy with the response from the Chief Executive?
Yeah, largely happy, yeah, but I think it's vital an impact assessment is carried out in regard to the CalMac situation, for sure. It's not going to only impact residents of Harris, but it's going to impact the whole of Lewis as well, when we're struggling to get off the island in a few months' time.
Don't forget the U's, Stephen. Come on.
And the fewest, indeed. But just also to thank you for all your work, Chair, on this. You've been relentless in your determination to try and get things resolved. So.
Not getting very far at some point, but anyway, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Chair. Just 2 quick points following the debate. I'm not sure what representations may have been made already regarding membership of the High Working Group for Benbecula, but the committee may wish to ask that there be representation either at elected member level or even officer level, as well, obviously, as of staff from Benbecula Airport. On the ICIA point, I think it's a point we should be making, and will I think from this debate make to Transport Scotland and others, regardless of whether a formal ICIA is required. And I'll pursue that point. There should be a structured, formal assessment in consultation with the local authority about the effect of such a major closure of a facility and withdrawal of a service, rather than simply a solution which is not acceptable to communities being presented as a fait accompli. I think that there are issues, regardless of the formalities of the Islands Act, about how those responsible for the service and those responsible for delivering it have gone about that, and we will pursue that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair, and I add my own congratulations to you in the work that you've been doing. Sometimes we're successful in endeavours, and sometimes we're not, but it's certainly not through lack of endeavour that we're not quite got to where we need to be yet. However, what I was going to say is on the island impact assessment, I think it absolutely supports members' views on that, and I think an issue came up at Communities and Housing as well on the withdrawal of funding for oil and gas central heating systems, which is likely to have severe and disproportionate impact on island communities. So I think government, the agencies of government are singularly failing to adhere to its own regulations. Sorry, are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. So I think we should just make a general representation to government as well, that it's not a follow-on, it's not an afterthought that these assessments should be made just to tick a box. It is vitally important that they are done at the appropriate time in the early stages of any consideration of policy or legislative changes that impact on our community. So I would certainly support a general representation on that to government.
Thank you, Kenny John. Councillor MacLeod, also MacLeod.
A pleasure. Thank you. I would endorse whatever was said. Well done, Mr. Robertson. You and your team did a fantastic job, and it was great to see unity and cooperation rather than people opting out of responsibility. So well done, all involved. I pick up on what Councillor Finnegan said. I think the ICIA has now just become an afterthought. It's really unfortunate. This was a vital part of the Islands Act legislation, and it just seems to be ignored or brought in at the last minute or watered down. I mean, we fought long and hard for the Island Act and the protection for island communities. And unfortunately, the current government just seem, or organisations like Comhairle seem to ignore what's on the statute book. I think we should involve the MSP in this and make an issue of it, because it's vitally important going forward that major projects are under the umbrella of ICIA, and we can see what's happening in Uig with the current ferry scenario. It's just not acceptable. I think we should make a strong case for involving our MSP, bringing it up in Parliament, because it's not acceptable for island communities.
Leader.
It was always going to be a concern that people would pay lip service to the impact assessments. And it was something that we expressed early on. I think Mr. Wheelers was at the wheel then, or somewhere around it, when he was involved in this particular subject. And we were saying at that point that it's important that across government, people understand, not just the Islands Minister, but across government, through every department, it's made clear that this is a significant piece of legislation, and it's a significant piece of work that they should be doing for every piece of legislation or any change in policy, etc., that comes out. So in the sense that Mr. Finnegan is saying we should keep at it, I absolutely agree. It's still early days, to be honest. I think we took the view on the Comhairle one that would be a good example. It'd be we wanted something significant, and it has proved to be a good example where they've had to go through hoops that they wouldn't previously have to go through, and that helped us to get where we are today. But it is important that we keep pressing across government, and it must be in the DNA of all our officers here when we're bidding for sums for capital, or when we get programmes foisted upon us, or we get programmes put to us by government that we have to run with. It must be in the DNA of every officer here to say, is this something that requires an impact assessment because it's disproportionately affecting us? So yes, let's keep the profile of it up and keep pressing it. I do recall that in the early days, it was very disappointing that when we spoke to Comhairle and we spoke to the Prospect Union about has there been an impact assessment, they came to us and we had an early meeting, and then you went off with it. But at that point, the response from our MSP was that this process had started before the Islands Act was on the books, and therefore wasn't subject to it, which was a surprise and a shock to me, because other ministers were saying it's coming, we know it's coming, and therefore anything that comes through in the next year or two should be done in the spirit of the Act. And I think that spirit of impact assessments is something that people embraced early on, but it isn't pan-government, and we have to make sure that everybody's aware of it and it becomes a feature of every piece of work that comes out. So I agree with Mr. Finnegan's emphasis that we keep pressing across the board on this, so that it becomes part of everybody's thinking going forward. Thank you.
Convener.
Thank you, Chair. I think we do have to be careful that we don't overegg it, because the success of the impact assessment that we've had has been a real sharp focus on that particular issue. Because if we make everything a priority, the reality is going to be that nothing's a priority. Yep. And I think the focus that has been on Comhairle over that period of time is what's given us some traction on that, and we need to continue that with the other services, both in Wicket and Benbecula as well. So I think we need to be careful that we don't make it carte blanche and they'll just rip it apart. So I do think we need to have that sharp focus going forward.
Councillor Mackay.
Rory Mackay, Benbecula and North East. I'm not a member of your committee. Well, on the face of it, the scrapping of the ridiculous Hyal ATMS is fantastic news. It's concerning that Hyal's pushing forward with the downgrading of Benbecula Airport. This is completely unacceptable. Benbecula Airport is around 3 miles from the biggest danger area in Europe, the Hebrides Range. Live firings take place regularly, air-to-air, ground-to-air, long-range, beyond-the-horizon firings, and also armed drone operations taking place. The fare-paying public expect the best and safest service, not the cheapest, least protective service that Hyal can get away with. I think it's important that this cornea gets behind the people of Benbecula and push Scottish Government to ensure that Hyal drop the ridiculous notion that Benbecula Airport can be downgraded to FISA level. It's unacceptable and quite frankly, it's dangerous.
Yeah, and we shall continue making that case, Roddy. You know, yeah, quite right. Winch on one side and potentially a spaceport on the other. You know, it's. We've gone off piste there quite a bit, and Sheena won't be happy with me. So. Oh, Ray Mackenzie. Ray.
Thanks, Chairman. Not on your committee. Just a couple of interesting points. I'm fully behind everything that's been said so far, including references to yourself. Well done on that. It's really a couple of questions. One, anyway, with regard to Uig Pier and the upheaval that's going to be caused to the islands, all the islands, because of this. I understand that it is owned by Highland Council. Is that the case?
That's correct.
And is it also the case that the Scottish Government has bailed them out to the tune of £60 million for the Uig Pier? And if so, Highland Council have let us down badly. And how do we avoid this happening in the future? And can we look at are there any other cases where we might be affected by Highland Council, or well, it will be only Highland Council? And just to touch on the other point that Roddy's just raised about Benbecula, I thoroughly agree, and I never quite appreciated probably enough the danger aspect of the closeness of Benbecula Airport to the rocket range. I mean, I knew about it physically, but the fact is, this is one aspect which is unlike probably any other airport, through the Highlands, through the Highlands area, and that particular point, I think, should be the number one point, to use in the argument for Benbecula. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Highland Council, as you said, do own Uig Pier, and a lot of us have argued about the lack of investment over the last 30 years by them in Uig Pier, bearing in mind the amount they get in terms of pier dues. And I've had that conversation with Highland Council recently, I can assure you. So I'll watch this space. In terms of Benbecula, we will continue to make the case in terms of, in terms of the safety, the value of the jobs that are there, based on the fact that most of them are young local people with families, so we will continue making that argument, and I think persistent pays, I think, in the end, and I value the work that's been done by everybody in here, and also by particularly Benbecula Community Council itself, who have worked very hard on this issue in relation to the petitions and the Youth Task Force as well, so we're all in it together. Roddy, you've got your light on. Okay, are we quite happy with that? Have you? I know we've gone off on a tangent a bit, but do Chief Executive.
Chair, I don't think it needs to be noted in the recommendations, but can I take it the committee's approving the point about representations about the
Yes.
working group for
Yeah,
Benbecula?
absolutely, yes. I think that's, yeah. And seeing we're off on tangents anyway, I might come up with something in terms of the current Ernst & Young report and some of the press you've seen about Calmac and so on and so forth. And I had a brief discussion with a leader this morning, so I might come up with something controversial just to upset the apple cart a bit, and so we don't go down the keep Calmac and carry on route again, you know, which happened last time.
Yes, Chair, since you mentioned that, there's a great deal of, well, interesting material which seems to be coming out of the report. I haven't seen it yet, but I think it would probably merit the committee meeting formally or informally to look at what's coming out of that, depending on government's response. It's one I think the Corla should watch very, very closely.
Yeah, I do intend putting some suggestions into the pot, and you'll probably run from the building in fright. Well, anyway, can we go back to recommendations? Do members agree recommendations 3.1? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now we move on to traffic management, road safety. This report provides an update on matters associated with road safety and proposals to align a Comhairle road safety strategy under Transport Scotland's road safety framework launched early last year. The report provides an update on local actions related to that process and also details the TROs currently recommended for implementation and requests for reassessment of speed limits in certain areas. In that regard, the report seeks delegated authority for officers to promote and implement emergency, temporary or experimental TROs, and that the Comhairle's road safety strategy be progressed under review by the TNI Member Officer Working Group, or as may be the case by the relevant Member Officer Working Group to be established in the next term. Callum Mackenzie will speak to the report and answer any questions. Callum.
Thank you, Chair. You've covered much of the context in your introduction. There are quite a number of recommendations there, but the principle behind them goes back to aligning a local strategy to Scotland's road safety framework to 2030. There are links within the report to the framework and to the annual action plan, and I would commend these to members to have a look through and have a read of them. It is quite a lot of reading, but in the context of what it is, I think it's well worth having a look at. The Scottish Government's targets to 2030 are to achieving a reduction of 60% in the number of serious injuries and fatalities on Scotland's roads. Their targets to 2050 are to have 0 serious injuries or fatalities on Scotland's roads. So these are very ambitious targets, and we're happy to align a local strategy with the government's targets. Officers have attended the first local partnership forum, which is part of the governance structure that's been set up for the National Road Safety Framework. And we've been successful as well in the lead officer in Transport Scotland attending 2 local area meetings here with ourselves from the council and colleagues from Scottish Fire and Rescue and Police Scotland. So we have found interaction with the Transport Scotland team very good on this and very useful. There are additional sums of money being set aside for the next financial year for capital. There's a pot of 15 million being put aside specifically for road safety, and officers will be looking to, along with our partners, as to how best to put in applications from the Western Isles for that. So in terms of the report, paragraph 8.2 highlights the TROs that we intend to continue to progress with at a local level, and paragraph 8.3 details the speed limit reviews that were requested. However, I'm looking to defer these and for them to be evaluated in an area-wide context for the Western Isles in line with the national strategy, one of the actions being for a national review of speed limits. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on any other aspect of the report. Thank you.
Convener.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for that, Cal. With regard to the UG School 20-mile-an-hour limit, it's down as being for consultation. One of the things that has changed that to some extent is the number of houses that are now being built both towards the Ballinakillia Church and also the Ersta development as well. So I would hope that that would take account of the school, which is right in the middle of all of that. But it would also be useful to have that 20-mile-an-hour limit at both ends, if you know what I mean. You probably need more than 2 signals as well, because of the what used to be the care unit on the corner. There needs to be some kind of signage there as well.
Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair. Just for confirmation again along the same lines, the Arnold Village 30 miles per hour consultation required. I take it that's the inner village off the main road. I know a number of occasions we've raised the concerns of the community about the speed of traffic going through the main road going through Arnold. I don't know if that's going to be revisited or is this just an entirely separate exercise. The community concerns remain for that, and I think it did reflect at the time there was actually a fatality a number of years ago on the main road. The speed of traffic through Arnold is quite excessive, and I think even the most recent analysis suggested it was right up there at the top end of the legal limit on average, suggesting possibly someone would have been over that. So just are we going to look at that main road going through Arnold again, or is this? I suspect this one is to do with a separate area within the village.
Callum, you want to come back on the convener's point and then Kenny John MacLeod's point?
Yes, in terms of UG, it does make sense to look at that area while we're looking at the school as well. It's early in the process, so it's time enough to do that. In Arnold Village, the discussions we had with the Community Council were to focus on the Arnold Inner Village. Just for clarification on that as well, one of the reasons we are proceeding with that one is that we've had clarification that the law on restricted roads, which I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, but generally, if you have street lights at a distance of less than 187 metres apart, then if it's a C-class road in Scotland, that can be deemed to be enforceable as a 30-mile-an-hour limit. That's not the case in the Arnold Village, because the streetlight provision is only a amenity light provision. So I'm going back to discussions we had with the Arnold Community Council and the agreement at the time to promote the 30 through the village because of the amount of tourist traffic going to the Garnon Black Houses. So that's the context of the TRO that we intend to continue. Through the main road in the village, again, that falls within the context of being reviewed on an area-wide basis in the context of Scottish Government's national review of speed limits. So we want to be consistent where we're looking at main roads, village roads, A-class roads. We want to be consistent Western Isles wide. We want to be consistent with the national view on speed limit review as well. I hope that answers both these questions.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Morrison.
Well, thank you, Chair. Just a point for Mr Mackenzie. I have spoken to him already, but I would like at 8.3 the inclusion of the Stretchel Road beyond Laxey heading south to Harris, where we've got an end of a 30-mile limit before you come to the 30-mile limit in Ballalan, where motorists are travelling at excessive speeds. I've had a lot of representation here recently. Just beyond the Laxey 30-mile limit, we have 2 churches, 2 manses, 2 houses, one which has been run as a commercial business. We're finding motorists are coming out of the 30, going at excessive speeds, quite often breaking the 60-mile limit and catching people out, coming out of either church or the businesses. There are young children there, they've got nowhere to walk alongside of the road, and it is a serious concern. So I would like maybe to put that part of the road for inclusion at 8.3, if possible. If we can't extend the 30, if it will be possible, and I think I've spoken to you already about this, Mr. Mackenzie, putting in maybe a flashing 60 in to make motorists aware that there's a 60-mile limit there, because they are at excessive speed going through that area.
Callum, you want to respond? I know I had a look yesterday at another, for the second time, at an area but I'll speak to you separately on that, and I've done that already rather than just now. Councillor McCormack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. Thank you, Callum, for your report. I want to refer to the section Creed to Macaulay Farm, which at the moment we have a 40-mile section, then a 60-mile section, then a 40-mile section, and common sense would suggest it should be 40 all the way through. And I think that is what your aspiration was, but what does it mean to say that the responses have to be reviewed? Does this mean that some people have actually said they want to keep the 60 in a little bit? And the other thing I wanted to ask about was the Stornoway 20 miles per hour. I have personally had nothing but positive responses to that suggestion myself. And I just wonder what exactly you're intending here. Are you saying that if nationally towns agree to go for 20 miles per hour, we will go for 20 miles per hour, but otherwise we may not?
Callum, do you want to respond to that? I know we've had lots of discussion about this particular topic, and I'm satisfied that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in this case. But can you answer Councillor McCormick's point anyway? Yes,
I'll come in on Councillor Angus Morrison's point as well. I'm going to Councillor McCormick's points. In terms of Laxey and looking at paragraph 8.3, paragraph 8.3 is by no means the whole picture, and in the context of doing a Western Isles wide review of speed limits will include the Laxey area and many other areas as well, so that we're consistent in our review of speed limits throughout the islands. So it may be looking at each village in turn, and with the government's view on road safety and active travel, there may be more of a focus on where walking routes are provided. So I don't want to, again, prejudice what the National Speed Limit Review might come up with, but that list in 8.3 will include probably many other aspirations from members as well to look at speed limits. But again, the context will be, we'll await Scottish Government's national review and then align ourselves to that. There's significant amount of work in doing that, and we're quite hopeful that when Scottish Government say that we're looking at a national review, that they will actually assist with that, both in terms of funding and resources. Councillor McCormack's point on Creed to Macaulay Farm, the intention is, as you state, to have consistency in approach and to extend the 40 to just beyond Macaulay Farm there, to take in the blind summit as you come in from Creed. And that has been promoted. We have had 2 responses. One has been positive and the other has been negative. So what we want to do with that is just follow the process through and deal with the negative response as quickly and as efficiently as we can do. In relation to the Stornoway 20s, there were significant objections to the initial proposals. And what I would like to do in the Stornoway area is, again, align that with what the Scottish Government's views may be, and that will require further consultation down the line as well. There has been a change in the way traffic regulation orders can be applied, specifically in relation to experimental orders where the need for consultation isn't as onerous. But again, that only becomes an experimental order for a limited time period. So I know that there are lots of desires to look at various speed limits throughout our infrastructure. But the main context of this report is to proceed with ones that we've developed significantly or made commitment to, but the rest of them being in the context of a national review and a local Western Isles area wide review as well. I hope that answers the questions, Chair.
You can't please everybody, Angus. Councillor John Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see that Galston's on this 8.3 list, because since I came into the council, they've been at me to get a speed limit down the village. The only village between Barvas and Portoness that hasn't got a speed limit. Now there's a housing scheme there. There's at least 12 new houses there, and there's a business park there now with the Uras offices and all that. And I think it's essential that the speed limit should be taken right down through Galston, as the traffic is. The traffic is very, very heavy, especially in the summertime. And there's kids there in the housing scheme, and I think we should look at putting a speed limit up. I've been fighting for this since I came into the council, and that wasn't yesterday.
You want to respond, Callum? I have heard Councillor Mackay mention this once or twice.
Thank you, Chair. It is on the list in 8.3, but again, the plea and the context is that there are so many requests coming in that to be consistent, I would like to do an area-wide review of speed limits so that we look at all roads, we look at all villages, and we have a consistent approach and aligned with the national review of speed limits as well.
It's a very good report, Colin. Leader?
It is a good report, but the whole system seems awfully cumbersome. I mean, Calla just mentioned there that the one out at Creed, and they've got one objection. I mean, this has been going on for some time. We're going to put the speed limit in. So is there a way in which we can speed up? Have we got any, can we take unilateral decisions once we've got a sense of whether it's acceptable or not? Can we not just crack on and get the speed limits put in place? My concern is that, you know, we don't have that much of a resource in your own department, as you know yourself, Colin. And if it's going to be as cumbersome as this and as long-winded, and it's going to take, you know, a year to put some small area into 40 mile an hour or 30 mile an hour, and one objection delays the whole process, is there a way in which we can interpret these guidelines more favourably so that we can just crack on with doing things that are eminently sensible to the vast majority of people? And just for the avoidance of doubt and for the sake of balance, all my representations on 20 mile an hour in Stornoway are directly opposite to Mr. McCormack's. Thank you.
Right, Callum, you want to respond to that in terms of quickening everything up, overdrive?
Believe you me, Chair, I wish we could. It can be a laborious process if there are objections. We have to take any objection on its merit and consider it in the context of what we're trying to do. There's an established national process for doing that, and in a way, the new process for experimental orders looks to be a way of getting something done quicker. We do have emergency powers which we can use, but to get something done permanent, it's still going to need consultation. And unfortunately, one objection is enough to either mean it has to go to an appeals panel, or in certain circumstances, we don't have to go down that route. We're having a look at that in the context of this particular speed limit just now and trying to resolve it as quickly as possible. The quickest way to resolve it is to go back to the objector and to get them to withdraw based on a further explanation of reason for doing it. I am taking legal advice on the best route through this and trying to expedite things as quickly as possible. So, sorry, Leader, I don't have a yes, here's a much quicker way of doing things, but we will endeavour to try to progress things there as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you, Sal. I'm seeing another couple of hands up, so Ray Mackenzie first.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not in your committee, but I take it that the leader wasn't really referring to speeding up and cracking on and quickening up and so forth. I'm sure that was just a type of phrase that he was using. Now, with regard to the creed, I raised this a long time ago, and one objection, it does seem, as Mr. Mackenzie said, taking a sledgehammer, you know, to just for one person objecting. And I'm pleased that, you know, we're taking this route of you know, contacting the, I understand, contacting the objector directly and trying to come to some persuasion to drop the objection. I don't know if that's really the technical way of putting it, but yeah, it does seem, you know, that one person can hold up the thing. It's a bit ridiculous. Okay, thanks.
We all know that awkward question, right? Councillor Macaulay.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to agree with what the leader has said. It is unfortunate that this is the Lochs Road is going to be held up again, and I would urge everybody to get it done as quickly as possible. At the end of the day, the reason this was taken up was concern from an elderly lady in April 2019 that the cars were speeding past her house on the way up to Marybank. They're obviously coming up to 3 years now since this was first brought to the attention, and I would like to support Calla in anything he can do to hasten this on a wee bit. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Macaulay. And very briefly, Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you, Chair, for your indulgence. It was just really to ask Mr. Mackenzie if he could not forget the previous proposal for paved or a set-aside area between the Barvis Junction and Brew. Subsequent to earlier discussions on this, there's about imminent completion of 8 houses on a stretch of road that is on the maximum speed limit at the moment as well, although part of that is going to be paved to the main road. However, as I'll remind him, a couple of private developments took place on the understanding that there was to be some sort of access, separate access for children to be able to walk to school. If we could just review that in light of the new housing development and the new houses there, along with the speed limit considerations and the extension of the footpath there. Thank you, Chair.
Callum, do you want to respond quickly?
There was a proposal, as Councillor MacLeod's aware of. Difficulty has been in actually getting a specification that the funding body is happy with. Presently, it's unaffordable with current budgets, but we are working on making that deliverable. I will contact Councillor MacLeod with an update as soon as I get one.
Okay, appreciate that, Colin. Right, I think we've covered that fairly thoroughly. So insofar as this committee's interests are concerned, do members agree the recommendation at 3.1?
Chair.
Thank you.
Chair. I was going to possibly mention Tongue Road.
Yes, I know. I've discussed that with Colin.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yes, we're well aware of it, Gordon, don't worry. We'll look after you, yep. 12, review and rationalisation of council buildings. This report provides an update on the review and rationalisation of council buildings. The appendix provides an overview of properties and rationalisation opportunities and does not include the school estate other than where there is potential for office space utilisation. Callum Mackenzie will speak to the report and answer any questions. Callum, you want to add to the report?
Nothing to add, Chair. Happy to take any questions on it.
Any questions for Callum on this item? Councillor McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. The reference to Stornoway Town Hall, I know that there are a number of people who still go there in order to access council officers, you know, in order to pay their bills and so on and so forth. There is a reference here to perhaps the provision of some kind of service of that in the town centre. I think that would be welcomed. People had got used to the idea of going to the town hall to pay various bills and seek advice. If that could be still part of what happens in the town hall, that would be very beneficial, I think, to local people. Thank you.
Callum, do you want to respond?
I am having discussions with the service department, with customer services on what provision they require. It has been an aspiration to have a local hub in the town centre. So we'll keep on working towards that, Councillor McCormack. Things have been quite difficult recently, as you can imagine, with the COVID restrictions and trying to manage how people interact with the Comhairle. But I think that'll form part of a larger strategy as well on digitalisation, but bearing in mind the need of people to have face-to-face contact as well. So it's not been lost, Councillor McCormack. It just needs a bit of further work on how we can provide that.
Do we have any idea when the council offices in Ballavany will open, Callum, at this point?
I'm in the process of putting together a staff note with the head of HR. We'll be doing that this afternoon and discussing it with the chief executive. My interpretation of the current guidance is that the guidance used to be to work from home where practical and whenever possible. That changed recently to enable organisations to move to a phased approach to hybrid working. So in general, my interpretation of that is that we can start to repopulate our buildings, not on a wholesale basis, but in a managed way where we phase staff back into the office environment, probably on a service priority basis to start off with, but then to have plans to enable all staff where necessary to be able to work in a hybrid way if that's their choice and the choice of the service. So we intend to engage again with our staff. We did survey a number of times through the pandemic as to what people's aspirations may be, individually and service-wise. We want to review that again just now. So we will be phasing people back into the office. Not everybody will have the facility to be able to work in a hybrid manner yet. Laptops are the easiest way to be mobile when you're working, but lead-in times still remain very long for laptops, both from the LED display side of things and with the processing chips. So I know I'm kind of expanding on your simple question quite a lot, Chair, but there is a process to go through. And what we're not looking for just now is a wholesale return to the office. We want to manage it in a way that services can keep going, people can work in the way that suits them where possible, and that we can facilitate that through IT infrastructure. So apologies for the long response, but we are working on a staff note and a strategy towards that.
I mean, there are quite a few working in the office currently in Ballyvanich and have been for some time. You know, it's just the door is locked, you know, so it's quite awkward. I mean, my sister's a home carer, for example, and getting, you know, gloves and protective equipment can be quite a challenge at times, you know. Councillor McNeill, you look as if you're going to press that button. Are you going to do it?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I was going to ask about the Ballyvanich offices and the potential losing out of the wing. Should we actually be even discussing that with Comhairle? Should we not be removing Comhairle from that list? I know that CAB have got alternative accommodation in the college in Leinaclet. Have you got any updates on potential clients or tenants? Tenants, that's the word. Thank you.
Callum, can you maybe expand in terms of who's interested and what type of discussion? I know Comhairle are now looking at moving into the new Century House, which they bought at great expense in Inverness.
We've been we've had a number of consultation meetings to do with accommodation in Ballyvanich or Benbecula as a whole. We've been working with HIE and Scottish Futures Trust in gathering interest. So we are aware of a number of organisations that wish to move to either hub working or co-location options. We're looking at putting more detail on how we can accommodate that, because there are a number of options in Benbecula. So in terms of the Ballyvanich office, we've had interest from the voluntary sector, from I know CAB were in the discussions whether that was going to be suitable for them or not. It was a matter for further discussion. Nature Scotland have intimated a request. Social Security Scotland, we're working with them on other avenues. Skills Development Scotland, we're working with. We were discussing with CEPA whether they have any requirements as well. But there are a number of interested people, and what we're trying to do is, and what we have done so far, is we've assessed what their needs may be and where their preferred location would be. So there's a bit more work to do on it, and I would hope to be able to report again, if necessary, back to March as an update on this. But if not, certainly to the first meeting of new council in June. So there has been quite a lot of work done on accommodation review, specifically around Benbecula and Ballyvanich. There are a number of options to be progressed. I don't know if you want any more detail on that, Chair, at this stage.
No, I mean, the initial interest years ago was from the Health Board. That appears to have disappeared, has it?
Not quite. The Health Board still work out of a couple of houses in Winfield Way, and there is a bit of interest there for trying to relocate. There have been a number of Health Board staff from occupational therapy that have already moved into the Ballyvanich office. So there has been movement in the past on probably on a minor scale. But what we're looking at here is really making the office work better for our own staff, for our own services, and accommodating as many others as we can.
Okay, Councillor McNeill.
Yeah, yes. I'm of the view that with the pandemic, that our office really need to look at again, because some of these offices are overpopulated. There are also empty offices. So why aren't the overpopulated offices the stuff from them transferred in, excuse me, into the empty offices. So, you know, we can make sure that your own staff are looked after first before we start, you know, start giving up valuable space. After all, if you give it up, you're not going to get it back.
I'm sure you're looking at all that anyway, Callum, in terms of the offices where you have 4 or 5 people currently, and in terms of the pandemic itself.
Yes, Chair, and I think I mentioned this earlier on in the performance report. Organisations, including the Comhairle, haven't fully worked out how best we can react to what's happened through the pandemic in terms of different ways of working, and what the service needs are. There is still the aspiration, as well as Councillor McCormack mentioned earlier as well, that you need to have local hubs where people can come and access services from. So we're certainly looking at that from the council's perspective. We're not looking at giving up space to others that we need ourselves, obviously, but other organisations as well are in the same position where they're reviewing what their needs are. And Councillor McNeil's right, there's probably an over-provision of offices now, with so many people deciding to work either full-time or part-time from home. So we need our space to work better for us in terms of the accommodation, but also for our services. So we need to be able to deliver increasingly better services to the public from the locations that we have, be that in a central location or be it more locally to them. So these are the aspects that we're still working on in terms of accommodation review and service review.
Thank you, Callum. Leader, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just to say, Chair, that I noticed there is reference to hybrid working throughout this document, and I just want to get some reassurance that we as an organisation are making sure that the service priority and the delivery of services to our communities is what's driving our plans. I mean, we should take a lead, and the management team would be taking a lead, saying these are the roles that we need to see back in office ASAP, and then we countenance things like what people's requests are. But surely the priority is the service priority, and we're delivering services for the public in a manner that suits the public, that gives them access. And I think it's something that we need to address and lead on, rather than simply say who wants to work from home or who wants to hybrid. I think the driver should first and foremost be the priority to deliver the services to the public, and then on the back of that, see how people fit in. So I hope that is the driver, because I am aware over the past few months, and it's inevitable because of COVID, that it was difficult for even members sometimes to get hold of officers. Yeah. And if it's difficult for members to get hold of officers, who knows how difficult it is for maybe members of the public with their public facing. So just hope that maintains our focus as we go forward.
Is that your driver, Colin?
It is. That's the priority driver. It has been in terms of trying to get people into the office when we were allowed to do so. And the service provision comes paramount to any other way we look at hybrid working. Hybrid working is something that can benefit us as an organisation and our individual staff as well. But you're right, Leader, the service to the public comes first.
Okay, Ray McKenzie, you've been waiting for some time.
Well, it's a good job. I did wait, actually, because the last 2 or 3 things have been covered quite a lot. And I agree with what the leader says there about delivery for the public is number 1. Obviously, we've been through a very difficult time, over the last couple of years. And it's an unnatural situation. And to touch on another point which Calla and Angus McCormack both raised, the question of having a hub in the centre. There's absolutely no point or no desirability in using the town hall in the centre of town for X, Y, and Z, and not for the council, because we do need that as a central hub. The governments will be calling for staff to return, and I think in England it's already, there's much more flexibility there, so we're looking at a very difficult situation, which has occurred over the last 2 years. We don't know how long. It might carry on for another year. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you. Yes.
Oh, that's okay, because my screen froze there for a minute. Yeah, but as these governments call for more and more return to work, and people want businesses, whatever, want to return to offices, the situation might change, because there's no point in us filling up the Sandwich Road offices, for instance, with other bodies who are just trying to get rid of their own offices, and then finding that we do need these premises. After all, the council offices are principally for council business. And it has been difficult to get hold of people over the last couple of years, and I agree with the leader on that point. I think that I don't think we should. I'm sure Callum's, looking at it from all points of view, and I don't think we should be rushing into this. And I think it should be coming back to, the council, as he says, March or maybe even June or later. I don't think it's something that can be rushed, because circumstances are changing all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I don't think there was a question there, but Callum, do you want to respond? I think
that we've had some positive discussion here on what the priorities should be, and I'm happy to come back and report back to Council whatever necessary to do that. But I take the point. It is quite a complex thing that we're looking at just now, and it covers many services, including our own. So, yeah, I'm just happy to keep members updated with progress.
we're working you hard this morning. Anyway, do members agree recommendation 3.1? Yeah, okay, thank you. Following items in private, so we'll move to item 14. Report.
Sorry,
Dan?
Chairman, that seems to be, if you take item 3.1b, delegate authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Head of Property and Infrastructure to progress discussions, yeah, fair enough, and agree terms with organisations seeking co-location opportunities. That last part, does that mean that it will not be coming back to the council, or what does it actually mean? Because having said what I said about not rushing into things, we don't want agreements be made and then find that, we want these offices.
Well, it is coming back to council. I think we've agreed on that. All right, Callum.
It says agree terms with organisations seeking co-location opportunities. That's the only thing I was worried about.
If I can just clarify that point to Councillor Mackenzie, there are times where an organisation would come to ourselves in the Comhairle and say, can I have a desk here, or can I have an office there, or can we work with you in these terms? So an example just now is we're working with different units within Social Security Scotland, and they're looking for facilities to be made available to them, not on a permanent basis, but on part-time basis. And I wouldn't like to have to come back to council every time we have these maybe smaller items to deal with. So items that we can generally accommodate with no detriment at all to the council, but to benefit. So that's really what that delegation is for.
Okay, thanks, Chairman.
I wouldn't be taking any decisions which I thought was going to be, of a major scale without coming back to you. But it's to give us enough authority to actually manage some of our partner agencies to come and join us just now where there is no detriment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Callum. So I think we're on to reports outstanding. That's for noting. Any questions on this particular item? No? Okay, we'll now conclude the meeting and go into private to consider items 6 and 13. The relevant officers and members should remain, and I will ask all other participants to please leave the meeting now.